Elena Vasquez had never asked for much, just safety, stability, and a place where her 7-year-old son Mateo could move freely without judgment. After years of sacrifice and overtime hours in the emergency room, she'd finally found it. Willow Creek Estates. A quiet, manicured suburb with cul-de-sacs, trimmed hedges, and a promise of family-friendly living. The moving truck had barely rolled away when Mateo pointed at the wide sidewalk and said, "Mom, I can race here." His wheelchair, custom-built to support his spine and motor skills, glided easily over the smooth pavement. It wasn't just a house. It was freedom for both of them. But peace doesn't always come easy, and in Willow Creek, it had a gate, a code, and a name: Karen Whitmore. Karen introduced herself the day after they moved in. She wore a pastel sweater knotted around her shoulders and carried a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. Her blonde hair was stiff with spray, her smile tighter than a locked gate. "You must be the new neighbors," she chirped. "I'm Karen Whitmore, president of the Willow Creek HOA." Elena extended a hand. "Nice to meet you. I'm Elena, and this is my son, Mateo." Karen barely glanced at Mateo, who was spinning slow, careful circles in the driveway. Her gaze drifted to the wheelchair ramp that extended from the porch. Her lips pursed. "That ramp," she said, tapping her clipboard. "Did you get approval for that?" Elena blinked. "It was already installed when we bought the house. My son needs it." Karen's smile faltered, just slightly. "Well, we do have architectural standards. I'll check the paperwork." Elena nodded politely, but her stomach tightened. The first notice arrived 3 days later. A violation for unauthorized structural modifications. The fine, $150. Then came a warning about Mateo's sensory garden, an arrangement of bright flowers and textured plants he used for therapy. Visual clutter, the letter said. Non-conforming vegetation. Elena appealed each notice. She cited medical necessity, provided documents from Mateo's doctors, and even invited a board member to visit. Her requests were met with silence, or worse, more fines. Karen became a shadow in Elena's days, hovering, watching, jotting things down. One morning, Elena caught her photographing the wheelchair-accessible van parked in the driveway. "It's unsightly," Karen said without being asked. "Garage use is mandatory. Section 4C. "The van doesn't fit," Elena replied. "It's taller because of the lift." Karen tilted her head. Perhaps a different vehicle would be more suitable for the neighborhood. Elena wanted to scream, but didn't. Mateo was watching from the window. Instead, she folded her arms. "This vehicle is suitable for my son's life. That should be enough." Karen didn't respond. She just walked off, her heels clicking like a metronome counting down to war. By the time October arrived, the conflict had escalated beyond passive-aggressive notes. Elena returned home from a night shift to find a landscaper hacking away at the front yard. The plants Mateo loved gone, mulched into nothing. "I'm with the HOA," he said. "They said to remove all non-compliant installations." Elena's voice trembled. "You destroyed my son's therapy garden." The man shrugged. "Just doing my job." Mateo was in tears. He didn't understand why his favorite space was gone. Elena held him close, breathing through the fury. That night, she emailed Karen. "Your decisions are affecting my disabled child. I'm asking you, human to human, please stop." Karen's reply came the next morning, a formal letter citing her authority under the HOA charter and a new fine, this one for unapproved yard modifications during the growing season. It ended with, "All residents must adhere equally to the standards, regardless of personal circumstances." That was the moment Elena understood. This wasn't ignorance, it was targeted control. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was using them as weapons. The final blow came 2 weeks later. Elena was working another long shift. Mateo was being watched by Mrs. Jameson, the sweet 70-year-old neighbor who often baked cookies for him. A landscaping truck backed into the driveway, called in by the HOA, without notice. Mateo had left his wheelchair near the front garden as he played with sidewalk chalk. By the time Elena got home, the chair was in pieces, crushed under a tire. Mateo sat on the porch steps, his cheeks stained with tears, Mrs. Jameson hovering helplessly. He ran it over, the old woman said, voice shaking. He didn't even stop. Said he thought it was some kind of lawn sculpture. Elena couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. The wheelchair, a custom model she'd fought insurance for, was more than mobility. It was Mateo's independence. His confidence. Later that evening, Karen's voice crackled through the phone after Elena called. I warned you about leaving non-approved items in public view, she said flatly. This isn't a playground. It's a community. Elena stared at the crushed frame of the wheelchair in her garage, hands trembling. No, she whispered. It's about to be a courtroom. Elena stood in the living room, gripping the remains of Mateo's wheelchair joystick. It had been twisted beyond recognition, plastic snapped, wiring exposed. The sight of it gutted her. Mateo sat quietly nearby, drawing uneven shapes on a sketchpad. His silence was unfamiliar. He hadn't smiled since the accident. The next morning, she made calls, insurance, repair shops, even the hospital's mobility department. No one could get a replacement chair for at least 8 weeks. Mateo's model had been custom designed to support his posture, motor control, and growth. Without it, he could barely move outside the house. The temporary loaner was bulky, unstable, and impossible for him to maneuver on his own. By Thursday, Elena's patience had eroded into something sharper. She compiled every HOA notice, every fine, every email from Karen Whitmore into a single digital folder. Then, she drove to a downtown law office with matte black windows and an ADA-compliant ramp at the entrance. Inside, she met Marcus Flynn, a civil rights attorney with a reputation for turning HOA bullies into cautionary tales. This isn't just harassment, Elena said as she slid the folder across his desk. This is systemic discrimination. Marcus flipped through the documents, pausing at the photos of the destroyed garden and the crushed wheelchair. His brows lowered. She did all this after you informed them of your son's disability? Repeatedly. I've provided medical documentation, explained the legal protections, everything. He looked up. Then Karen Whitmore just made the worst mistake of her life. By the time Elena stepped outside, the sun had dipped behind the city skyline. Her exhaustion was real, but under it simmered something fiercer. The powerlessness she'd endured for months was being replaced by purpose. Back in Willow Creek, the mood had shifted. News of the incident had trickled through the neighborhood. Mrs. Jameson had told a few people. Someone had posted anonymously on the community forum. President Whitmore destroys child's wheelchair. ADA violation? The post disappeared within hours, but whispers lingered. Karen, however, showed no sign of retreat. She doubled down, sending yet another letter to Elena, this one threatening legal action for defamation and harassment against the HOA board. Elena scanned the letter, heart steady. Then she passed it on to Marcus, who chuckled when he read it. Good, he said. She's documenting her ignorance in writing. Within days, Marcus filed a formal complaint with the Department of Justice citing ADA violations, civil rights infringements, and criminal negligence. A second filing went to the state attorney general. And a third, a civil suit, landed squarely in Karen's inbox. The headline on the summons read, Vasquez versus Whitmore and Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Elena didn't hide. She posted the documents publicly. And when a local reporter reached out for comment, she gave one, calm, measured, and devastating. My son is disabled, not invisible. The law protects him. Karen Whitmore thought her clipboard made her untouchable. She's about to find out she's not. The interview aired that evening on the local news, alongside footage of Mateo smiling faintly as he colored on the porch. The shot zoomed in on the broken wheelchair in the background, its twisted frame silhouetted in the fading light. By the weekend, the HOA board was in damage control mode. A meeting was called. Residents showed up in record numbers, including parents who had previously stayed quiet. Karen tried to speak, but her usual icy confidence had fractured. This has been blown out of proportion, she insisted, scanning the crowd. The HOA has rules for a reason. We're maintaining standards. From the back, a voice rose. You crushed a child's wheelchair. Another. You used the rules to harass a single mother. That's not standards, that's control. Karen's face reddened. You people don't understand how this works. But she was losing them. The tide had shifted. After the meeting, Elena received messages from other residents, offering support, legal connections, even anonymous tips. One person revealed internal emails where Karen instructed HOA vendors to accelerate compliance enforcement against non-standard households. The language was vague but damning. Marcus's office had what it needed. Within days, the Department of Justice confirmed it was opening an investigation into Willow Creek HOA. Karen was served again, this time by federal agents. Elena watched from her kitchen window as they arrived, black SUVs pulling up to Karen's neatly trimmed lawn. For the first time, Karen didn't have her clipboard. She stood frozen, arms crossed, face pale, as she was handed the paperwork. Elena didn't smile. Not yet. Justice was in motion, but it wasn't finished moving. The day Karen Whitmore was summoned to appear in federal court, the HOA board scrambled like ants under a kicked-over nest. Emails flew between board members. Emergency meetings were called. A law firm was hastily retained. But the damage had already metastasized beyond control. Elena watched it unfold from a calculated distance. She no longer had to raise her voice. Now the law spoke for her. Mateo, meanwhile, was adapting. His loaner wheelchair lacked the comfort of his custom model, but he never complained. Instead, he watched his mother with quiet admiration, sensing the shift in power, even if he couldn't name it. In the evenings, he sat beside her as she scrolled through court documents and press updates. He asked questions. She answered honestly. One night, Mateo leaned against her shoulder. Are they in trouble? They're learning what happens when you hurt someone who can't fight back, she replied. And when you do that to the wrong mother. The DOJ investigation was swift and thorough. Agents interviewed residents, combed through HOA records, and reviewed internal emails. The anonymous leak turned out to be a board member, someone who had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Karen's unchecked authority. The emails were damning. One read: residents who don't meet the community's ideal image should be handled quickly before they attract others like them. Another: we can't let this place turn into a sanctuary for special exceptions. Karen had signed both. Elena sat in Marcus's office as he slid the printed documents across the desk. She didn't just violate the ADA, he said. She institutionalized the discrimination. That ramps this into federal civil rights territory. The board's attorney offered a settlement. A 6-figure payout, non-disclosure agreement, and a carefully worded apology. Marcus barely glanced at it. She doesn't want money, he said coolly. She wants accountability. The story went national. Major news networks picked it up. HOA president under federal investigation for destroying disabled child's wheelchair. Advocacy groups rallied. Disability rights activists launched online campaigns demanding criminal charges. Karen's face, once a local emblem of order, became synonymous with cruelty and corruption. The pressure mounted, but Karen refused to resign. At the next HOA meeting, she arrived dressed like she always did. Pristine blouse, clipboard in hand, jaw clenched. But the crowd awaiting her wasn't compliant anymore. Dozens of residents stood in the back, arms folded. Parents of disabled children, veterans with mobility aids, retirees who'd lived quietly under her rule. Even Mrs. Jameson had made it, propped up on a cane. Karen called the meeting to order. A man near the front interrupted. There is no order here, Karen. Not anymore. Another voice followed. You used rules to break a child. What kind of leader does that? Karen tried to reply, but her voice faltered. This community has standards. A woman stepped forward. So does the law. And it just knocked on your door. The board voted that night to remove her as president. The motion passed unanimously. Karen sat stiffly as the vote was counted. She didn't speak. Her face was blank, her clipboard unmoved. But for the first time in months, Elena saw it. Fear. Not the kind you show, but the kind that settles deep in your bones when the power you built starts to crumble. The following morning, federal prosecutors announced formal charges. Willful violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Civil rights infringement. Criminal negligence resulting in the destruction of medically essential equipment. Karen's mugshot appeared across national media by sunset. Elena didn't celebrate.
Not yet.
That night, she walked out to the garage where the broken wheelchair still sat. She hadn't thrown it away. Mateo had insisted they keep it, not as a reminder of pain, but of what came next. "Can I paint it?" he asked her once.
She said yes.
Now, the frame bore streaks of color, blue, yellow, red, like a flag that had weathered a war and come out brighter. Elena sat beside it, the air warm with summer. She thought of all the mothers who had suffered quietly under people like Karen, who were still suffering. It wouldn't end here. It couldn't. She opened her laptop and typed out a name. Wheels Without Barriers. A nonprofit. A resource. A reckoning. This wasn't just about her son anymore. It was about every family told to shrink themselves to fit into someone else's idea of what was acceptable. The courtroom was packed. A quiet hum of tension buzzed beneath the soft shuffle of papers and the tapping of laptop keys. Elena sat at the plaintiff's table, flanked by Marcus Flynn and his paralegal. Mateo sat just behind them in his brand-new wheelchair, sleek, custom-fitted, the exact model he'd lost. His fingers traced its armrest slowly as he watched the judge enter. Karen Whitmore stood across the room, noticeably smaller, without her clipboard. Her expensive blazer did little to hide the pallor of stress that clung to her. The former queen of Willow Creek had become a defendant in a federal trial, and the empire she once ruled with letters and fines now sat in quiet rebellion behind her. The charges were read aloud, each one a drumbeat echoing through the chamber. Violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Targeted harassment of a protected class. Criminal negligence resulting in the destruction of essential medical equipment. Karen didn't speak. Her attorney entered a plea. Guilty, with conditions. But the judge wasn't interested in shortcuts. He ruled with clarity. Karen would face 6 months of probation, mandatory ADA sensitivity training, and a $50,000 fine to be paid to the Vasquez family, with an additional $100,000 contribution to a national disability advocacy fund. More importantly, he barred her from ever serving on any HOA board again. After court adjourned, cameras waited outside. Reporters called Elena's name, but she didn't speak, not yet. She walked Mateo to the car, his wheels humming against the concrete like the sound of a future finally moving forward. That evening, Elena sat in front of her laptop and clicked publish. Wheels Without Barriers went live. The website featured Mateo's story. Honest, unsensational, and powerful. It detailed what had happened, what laws had been broken, and what families like theirs could do if caught in similar webs. Resources, legal templates, contact information for ADA lawyers. A donation link appeared at the bottom. It went viral overnight. Within a week, messages poured in. Hundreds, then thousands. Parents from California to Maine. Veterans in Texas. A single father in Florida whose daughter's wheelchair ramp had been ordered torn down by his HOA. They all shared the same cry beneath their stories. We thought we were alone. But now they weren't. By the end of the month, Elena had partnered with advocacy groups across the country. Lawyers volunteered pro bono hours. A national disability nonprofit offered funding. Wheels Without Barriers became more than a website. It became a movement. Back in Willow Creek, the ripple effects were immediate. The new HOA president, a retired Navy officer with a disabled granddaughter, wiped every unjust fine from Elena's record. He personally apologized to her and Mateo and worked with the board to implement ADA compliance training for all members. The community followed suit. Driveways became more accessible. Families stopped hiding their needs for fear of fines. Gardens bloomed again. The fear Karen had ruled with drained away like water after a storm. One morning, Mrs. Jameson appeared at Elena's door with a fresh batch of cinnamon rolls. "I just wanted to say," she said softly, "what you did, it changed things. Not just for you, but for all of us." Elena smiled, blinking back tears. "I didn't do it alone." She looked down at Mateo, who now wore a little badge pinned to his hoodie. It read, Barrier breaker. He looked up and grinned. We did it, Mom. Months passed,
Seasons changed.
but Elena never stopped. She spoke at conferences, sat on disability panels, testified before state legislatures on HOA reform. Every time she stood before a microphone, she thought of the garden they tore out, the crushed wheelchair, and the silence she'd once been forced to endure.
And she spoke anyway.
Not with anger, but with conviction, with a mother's fire and a fighter's heart. In one interview, a journalist asked, "Do you think Karen Whitmore ever understood what she really did?" Elena paused before answering. "I think she thought silence meant permission. I think she believed power was permanent. But she forgot, real strength doesn't come from fear. It comes from standing up, from pushing back, from refusing to shrink when someone demands you disappear." The journalist nodded slowly. "And what comes next?" Elena smiled. Justice came. Now comes the rebuild. That night, she and Mateo sat on their porch, watching the sun dip beneath Willow Creek's horizon. His chair glowed in the golden light, bold, colorful, whole. It wasn't just a new beginning. It was proof that even in the most carefully manicured prisons, the roots of change could still crack the concrete.